Hello, Louisville. Guess who's coming to dinner? Well, hello. Welcome to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I am your host, Janis Carter Miller, and I am so excited about this evening. Sorry for the delay, but I was having some real serious computer problems. I really thought my computer was getting ready to crash, but it didn't. So here we are. So this is Black History Month, or let's say our History Month. They give us a month to talk about our history, but we can talk about our history all year long. And when I say our history, I'm getting ready to get into family history. Oh, because we got some family history going on for you here in the Ville. I'm talking about the Eliza Tevis Society, of which I am a descendant. And I am not the only one. We've got some family names that we're going to go through, but the only way I can do this if I introduce you to my new cousin. That's Mr. Nathaniel Green. I call him Nate. Hey, Nate.
Hey, Janice.
How are you, sweetheart?
I'm doing well today.
Well, you know what, Nate? I'm so proud of the work that's been put into getting the Eliza Tevis Society set up. And I want you to tell them a little bit about Miss Eliza Tevis. Now, I'm going to give them just a sneak preview. If you or anybody on this broadcast is from Newburg, you need to sit down and perk your ears up and take a listen, because you never know. They might be one of our relatives, huh, Nate?
Well, Liza Tevis, and you have to take this because some of this is oral history.
Okay.
But it has to be that way because that's the way America was set up. We were not privileged to be a part of the recordings and things because we were not considered to be human. But
Right.
Liza Tevis was a person who was enslaved and who left the enslavement to set up on 40 acres of land the community now known as Newburg, Petersburg. Now, that just didn't come about overnight.
Hmm.
There was a lot that went into it. This was around the 1850s when she became the owner of a piece of property called Wetwoods. And this was property that her slavers had willed to her, and she and her husband had purchased. And they had decided that this was going to be where they were going to land. And Liza Tevis somehow had decided this was going to be a free community. And of
Okay.
course, at that time, she had been given her freedom, and she was in the process of settling in. And she got the property and built a log cabin on the property. And that log cabin turned into several things. It started out, it was as her home. It started out as the church
The
called
church,
Baptist
yeah.
Church. It started out as a school, which would have been Newburg School, but
Okay.
and it was in fact a place where she purchased slaves and
Right.
brought them to her property, the 40 acres, to ensure that 40 acres got cultivated.
Okay. Hold
Now,
up right there. Just hold up. I'm going to have to interject every now and then. So go back even further. When you talk about Eliza was enslaved under the Huntleys, right?
Yeah,
That's the name of her enslavers. Is that
yeah.
correct? Now, I like to go over the story, so I make sure that when, as we say, oral history, and we're passing it down, I got to tell the story right,
Okay.
right? Because you know how you whisper in somebody's ear, and you have 6, 7 people, and when you get to the end of the line, it's a whole nother story.
It's a whole nother story. You're right.
So which one now? Yesterday on the podcast that we did, that you all did with the Louisville Historical League,
Uh-huh.
did I understand you to say, okay, John Tevis was was the slave master, right?
John Tevis. No, it was
John Huntley.
Huntley.
John. Oh,
John.
his name was Tevis.
No, Tevis was her married name.
Her married name. Okay,
But
but John Huntley was her enslaver.
yeah. Now she's got several names. She started out as Eliza
Curtis.
Curtis.
Right.
Then she became Eliza Huntley because the slave owners allowed her to use their name. And then she went on to become Eliza Tevis after
Okay.
she had been given her freedom, and she started the community called Newburg, and that community allowed her to use the name of Tevis because she had actually gotten married because she was a free person,
Right.
and once she had gotten that freedom, and she and her husband uh, Henry Tevis passed away, she remarried.
Okay.
So
Okay,
you
let's stop right there. I
other
want to go
name,
back. The thing that I'm trying to get you to talk to me about
yeah. Hang on a second.
is
Oh,
I want you to tell me about the
oh,
fact that her enslaver, he became ill, right?
he became who?
He became ill. He had the fever.
Yeah. Well, that was John Hunley.
Okay, let's
Right.
talk about that part. And I'm not so much interested in her. I'm just trying to take her from.
Right.
Okay.
Well, John Hunley and the Hunley family owned about 1,000 acres of land
Okay.
out there in that area now called uh, Bashford Manor. Uh,
Oh, Bashford Manor area. Okay.
yes, and John Hunley was the one who got sick,
Okay.
and she nursed him back to good health during the yellow fever epidemic.
Right.
Now, this is where some of the verbal history, the oral history, becomes kind of live because there were some people who were still around and was able to talk about this,
Mm-hmm.
and there were people who were declaring that somehow she was a sister, a half sister of the two sons, but we think that she was a part of the family biologically. Now that we're getting into the DNA, but basically she was treated as a privileged person on the Hunley plantation.
Okay. All right.
And
All right.
privilege came in the form that when she nursed him back to good health, he decided he was going to give her those privileges and allow her to do things. Now, you have to understand that these privileges and all these slave encounters kind of was a two-way street. It's like what do they call it now? Codependency. Uh,
Okay. Okay.
the
Okay.
like in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uh, you know, to be truthful, the slave master, he watched Uncle Tom, but he was afraid of Uncle Tom because Uncle Tom had really good influence over the slaves. And the last thing he would want is to have a slave rebellion because he did something against Uncle Tom, who was the only person who could hold these people together.
Right.
So when you had these big plantations and they had a lot of slaves, that was a big worry for slavers because they had to worry because you had so many slaves that they could overthrow the plantation.
Right.
So Eliza Tevis was kind of known as the person there who people could go to and count on to give good to get good advice to the slaves. And the Hunleys allowed that to happen.
Okay. All right.
And she took this information that she was gathering and actually educated herself. Now, because she was not an educated woman.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at court records and things like this, anytime something went wrong, she would make certain moves. She said, well, how did she know to do that?
Right. I heard you all saying that yesterday that she had a lot of court cases against people. If she thought it was wrong, she took them to court.
Yep. But she learned this as being the first, as being the person in the house around the Hundleys and around all the people who were politicians as to what to do when things did not go your way.
Right.
And somehow she retained all this in her memory, in her mind. And when things didn't go her way, she made decisions against it. Even when she married Henry Tevis, she entered into a prenuptial.
You said that.
Probably
A prenuptial agreement.
this is probably the first known prenuptial in the country. She,
Wow.
through her lawyer, told her husband that this is my land, and if if anything should happen, here's what the deal is.
And this is who the land should go to.
Yes,
And
yes,
he had to understand that because he was not family. He was marrying into all of this.
yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
he was faithful. He stayed with her and everything, but this is just the way her mind.
Right.
She was saying, "No, this is my property, and this is what I want to happen." Because she was one of the things she did, like when the slavers were actually selling off some of their slaves to other slavers,
Okay.
and these slaves may have children. Then Liza would go to the slave auction, and she would pick up a child or two that
Okay.
was left behind, and she
Right.
would bring them to her plantation or to Wetwoods, which was now Newburg,
Right.
and she would take care of them.
Well,
Or
she
she
kind
would
of
arrange,
she looked out for the other slaves.
yeah, she would make arrangements for those children to be taken back to the plantation in which they came and be cared for by other relatives on the plantation.
Okay. Okay.
Now, she learned all this on her own as to, how you do all this. I mean, this was something that she picked up and she decided she was going to engage in. And she did a masterful job. And now you have to understand, she also understood that having slaves made her rich, because slave was property. They call it chattel uh, um, slavery, and you were not a person.
Right.
You were treated like a cow or a hammer or a chair.
Mm-hmm.
You had no rights at all,
Right.
and that's a whole thing. That was a game that was played, and when whites come to you and say, but I didn't have anything to do with slavery. Well, it's not that, but the whole system was set up to embarrass blacks and to treat them as inanimate objects.
Right.
And that's what they were supposed to be, even to the point that some of the places in Virginia and Maryland had, now you have to understand there were a lot of laws that governed slavery.
Right.
The system of slavery and the system of enslaving. And many of those laws sought to ensure that Black people, Africans, were considered to be inhuman, and
Well,
that
Nate,
they
we
would be
still
like
have some of
cattle.
those laws today.
Yep.
There's still not a law against lynching.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you really look at it, how far have we come?
Yeah.
I mean, it's you don't like to say that, but the fact is, it's there. And
Yeah.
when we talk about reparations and things like this, it's like, oh no, you can't, but you didn't have anything to do. Well, had you not had slaves, you would not have America as it is today.
No, you wouldn't.
Period.
Absolutely.
And the thought that they had was, oh, you know what we can do? We'll just bring these black people over to America by way of the islands, and we will enslave them, take all their rights from them, make them cattle, and they would eat. They even have a law that said, like in Barbados, you weren't supposed to wear any clothes.
What said what?
Yeah, you wore no clothes.
Okay.
Then that was because you were treated like an animal, cattle.
Right.
Now,
Oh, wow.
where this relates is that there were also laws in Maryland and Virginia that said, well, you can put the clothes on them, but you have to have certain type of material, and it was coarse material, and it laid it all out. So every time you had another law, you had to have another law to ensure that blacks stayed
Stayed in their place.
as cattle. I'm saying cattle because that's the closest thing to chattel, and that helps us to identify. Yeah, I see where you're going. You want to keep them inhuman,
Right.
and then that was the thing. Now the game that was played, and I keep saying we dance around this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The game that was being played was, for instance, you were considered to be non-human, but at the same time you developed laws that said, if by chance a white woman were to marry an African, then that white woman herself and her offsprings became slaves and would automatically be enslaved. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Mm.
on the other hand, the white man had no such problem, because if he impregnated a black woman, so be it. He walked around with his chest out.
Right.
Now, people don't like to hear you talk about that, but that's the way it was.
Right.
That was a fact. Now,
Okay.
I say that because there's so many whites who believe that, I haven't been told the truth yet. We have people running around trying to decide what children should be taught in school today, and most of it is sugar coated.
Right.
And when they come out and they confront you and they say to you, oh, well, I never was taught this in school. Well, sure, because people even today, whites even today don't want other whites or blacks to know what the truth was.
Right. Right.
And so, as I say, how far have we come?
Yeah.
Still
Yeah. You say you have to look back and say, but really, how far have we come?
Yeah. And Tevis, Liza had figured out how to take all this information she was learning as she was washing dishes and cleaning and around all these people and hearing the conversations. She would pick up these little things, buying property, you need a deed. She pick up these little things, and as when she got her freedom, hey, she started to say, well, when this happens, you're supposed to do this.
Right.
And so her brilliance rose to the top.
So I'm going to go to the 4 churches that came out of having their meetings starting in Eliza's home, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And one of those 2 of the churches are still standing, right?
The Forest Baptist Church is still in Newburg, but it's not the original. The original was a log cabin.
Right.
And
that was Liza's house.
Yes.
Okay. But then since then it's grown. I mean, we saw some pictures of it yesterday, right?
Yes, right.
So
it was a
Forest Baptist Church. What was the other one? Mission?
Excuse me?
What was the name of some of the other churches that came out of
Well, now
Eliza's home?
there were other churches that came out of the Forest Baptist Church over time, and
Okay.
I'm not that familiar with them. Sherelle is, but I know there are several churches along Indian Trail.
Okay.
That even one that is called Forest Baptist something or the other, but they were all due to infighting among church members. People who moved in to new areas of the community and decided to have their own church, but still they were members of Forest, and they decided to set up other churches around the Forest Baptist Church
Right.
model.
Right. But I'm going back to Mr. Huntley. He got sick. Eliza nursed him back to health. But then did I understand you all to say that when Mr. Huntley passed, that his brother Thomas took over?
No, that was his sons.
That was his son. Okay.
Right. He had two sons, and
who were Eliza's maybe half brothers, huh?
That's what the DNA is beginning to kind of clarify, that there was a biological connection between those boys and Eliza Tevis and the dad. So we're expected to get some new information that's going to probably clarify that, and hopefully we'll be able to step forward to say yes. She was in fact, we know she was a light skinned woman, and very small, a small physique, but like you. but she just had a determination, and but she knew so much about the farm, I should say the plantation operation, that she was kind of operating as the CEO of the Huntley plantation. They relied on her for a lot of things.
Wow. And it seems like they trusted her.
Yes. Well, I've thought about that too, and in many instances, slaves were entrusted with the farm, with the plantation, because they knew more about what to do. Right. And the masters knew that they did. And again, like codependency, I don't want to mess with this person, because if they do, they will ruin my wealth.
Right.
It was all around wealth. It was all around the wealth that was created, because Black people were considered to be chattels, and they had no rights, no nothing. They were not human. Right. And like I say, yet they developed laws that said, if in fact they got married, well, if that's the case, why would you say they're not human? Right. So there was a big game that was being played.
Oh, all of it was a big game. I mean, the system was a game on humanity.
Yep.
Our humanity.
Yep.
That was actually they stole it from us, but through time we had to regain our own humanity in our struggle to be recognized as human beings.
Yeah. Janis, this is the reason why it is hard to believe. A lot of people find it hard to believe, to find some African Americans who opt to be in the other camp, and
to be Republicans.
Well, you say,
I say it.
Why would you go along with this? Well, actually, they may not even understand the whole framework of how they got to where they got. But most African Americans know when they are being had. They understand and know it. But you also have to realize, you have to have common sense, like Eliza Tevis. You have to say, I'll play my card this way here, and the next time I'll play another card.
Look, she held her cards close to her chest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, she was just clever. She was
Yeah,
clever. She gave up some things in order to get others, and
right.
and, and she understood that.
So let me ask you about this, Nate. So, since Newburg was more or less, I could say, our inheritance, am I correct?
Say that again.
I said Newburg is considered our inheritance, would have been.
Yes,
Okay.
it's
So,
yeah, it's we descended from that land, um, and the people who came, even though it's much larger than it was at that time, uh,
right,
the original crop of people who Eliza Tevis groomed and raised around that farm, you know, and subsequently other people who came in from other places were also free blacks, but she set it up around herself who was free and to be sure that other free blacks had places to go. And I always laugh because she used the same model of enslavement that they used, but she used it for a different purpose. She
she
used it
used it
to,
for freedom.
yes.
Yeah.
Um,
So, listen, so we're saying, so it was more or less Newburg encompassed the area that is part Butyl.
um,
It
Butch,
kind of went. It was over that way more so than where Eliza.
well, the Newburgh, the original Liza Tevis and my sister and Sherelle are trying to find a map. Well, there is a map, and if you follow that map, they're trying to say what was the original outlines. That 40 acres encompasses that graveyard there at the corner of
Right.
Old Newburgh Road and Indian Trail.
And see, my great grandmother is buried in that cemetery.
Yes, your family is part of our family.
I
And
know. I say because I saw. Now there were two sets of greens, one with the E and one without the E. Did you
right,
notice that?
yes.
Okay, so
Now you Janice, you're pretty complicated because if I remember, my sister began to look this up. You're also part of that Green clan that spells
right,
green with an E, but you're
with the
also
E.
part of the Green clan that spells it without the E, just as the color green.
Okay,
Because you are my grandmother, Katie Green Harris, or Katie Harris Green. She was a Harris.
okay.
Her brother, now I'm not sure I'm getting all this right. My sister has better comprehension of this, but my uh, Katie Green, my uh, grandmother, her brother's name was Mac, and Jerry Mack. His name is Jerry. Matter of fact, my father's name was
Well,
Nathaniel.
that's my great grandfather. My great grandfather's name
I
is Jerry Mack.
I think it would have been your great grandfather. Yes,
Huh?
I think it would.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
and
because he
his
was
name was
married
Jerry Mack.
to Hattie Green.
Well, he was originally married to Janis. What was her name? She Bartlett. She was originally married to a Bartlett. She was married 2 or 3 times.
Who? My grandmother?
Yes, yes. It was she was a. Let me look something up.
No, no,
I'm
no. You're talking about my great great grandmother. You're talking about Adeline. Adeline was a Howard, and then she
yeah.
was Adeline married. No, she married Mr. Green. Then she married Mr. Ross because Greens and Ross were half sisters and brothers.
Okay, that's see you doing it better than I did.
Okay, because look, I studied it the other day because I was putting the papers together.
Hmm.
Do you have the booklet that says descendants of John and Charlotte
Now,
Howard?
yeah. Now, before you get there, before then, Jerry Mack uh, was your, I guess he would have been your
No, not my great
your
great.
great great
He was
grand
my great.
great grandfather. But her Janet, I think her name was Jeannie Bartlett
Okay.
was at that time name was Bartlett. And she was married to Jerry Mack. So you're in our family through Jerry Mack
Through
and
my
Bartlett.
great grandfather. Wow. Now you know, have you ever seen a picture of Jerry Mack?
Yes, matter of fact, Edna has a picture. He's very dapper.
Oh, tight. Look, this is what I want to tell you, Nathaniel. I was around my great grandfather, Jerry Mack, until I was about 7 years old.
Is that right?
Yes. And his shirts were buttoned up to the top button. You hear me?
Yes.
Because his son, my uncle Tony, my uncle Jerry Mack, and my great grandmother, Hattie Green, had 3 children. They had Nettie. They had no, my grandmother, no, the Green. She had Nettie. She had and that ain't Net and Uncle Tom Green. Okay, Jerry Mack was their father,
Right.
my grandmother's father. Okay,
Right.
so my uncle Tony, who's Jerry Mack's son, who's also named Jerry Mack, but he didn't have any children. My brother and I used to spend weekends with them in Smoketown because they love my brother. I just got to come along because I was younger.
That's interesting. Well, now Edna has more. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have a
A
a
sit
with
down.
the family, and everybody sits down and one by one tell how you're connected because
Yeah.
because it does get complicated, and because of the way slavery was handled, you were not considered to be many times like my grandmother on my mother's side. She remembered all of her sisters, but all of her sisters had different dads, different husbands,
Wow.
and yet for some reason they were always able to identify themselves because it was a must on their part in terms of lineage,
Right.
you
Right.
know. And they had to accept the fact that they all had different dads, and they would be able to explain it, you know. But it wasn't like people want to moralize about it and say, oh, you know, these people
Yeah. Yeah.
savages, but that was not the case. We had to do things like that in order to survive.
So this is what I want to do right here, Nate. I want to switch this to have the audience to understand, to talk about how important it is to know, if you can, find out about your lineage and from where you came from, because it has a lot to do with who you are.
Yeah, I have a theory.
What?
It's
What's your theory?
Matt Green theory that a lot of our problems that we have today with the gun violence and things like that have to do with the fact that most of our young people, the ones who are having the babies and raising the babies, don't have a good, clear understanding of their value to society,
Right.
and
Okay.
because of that, um, uh, the children are don't have anything to look back at to say I'm worth something,
Right.
and it's all today. The gun values are all tied to present day values and present day things that are happening like TV and you know.
Well, our value
It
system has been diminished.
doesn't have anything to do with with the reality of that person as a human
Mhm.
being. It's just that they're chasing rainbows that don't really uh, exist or doesn't
Exist.
really
Mhm.
provide them with any value at all. And I
Right.
think even though I have to admit anybody who takes on a job of trying to clear up the gun violence, uh, uh, and you say, well, if I try to do this by going back and looking at history and getting them to understand it, that's going to be a long time. Yes, it is, but it was a long time for us to get here.
Oh,
And and
yeah.
and and if you are not willing to spend the time, you're not going to find an answer. And
We'll
many
lose a
kids right.
generation. We're losing a generation of children
that
as it
that
is.
that's exactly that's exactly what is happening. Uh, uh, and I'm not saying that it's a clear cut way of defining uh, what is going on, but it is one thing that is missing, and that is that the the African was treated inhumanly and was expected to see themselves as being inhuman. And a lot of that is spilled over. And people say, well, that was in slavery. No, it spilled over culturally. And we still have remnants of that going on now. And that's the reason why we need reparations. The only way government is going to get out of being ashamed of what they did to Africans is going to be reparations. And that is, I say that because there's never been an effort on the part of, of, of a constitutional government to actually say, look, we were wrong and we need to correct that wrong. And for African Americans. Now they have done it for
They've
everybody,
done it for everybody else.
Jews,
Right.
everybody has,
Right.
has been able to do this, but not African Americans. And we understand that because we were in a unique situation that many of them could not, and many of us did not understand what it would take. Now that we're having smarter young black children and adults who are beginning to understand that you're not what people said you were.
Right.
When I
Absolutely.
went off to college, I was told so many times by adult blacks, well, why are you going to college? It's not going to do you any good. And anyway, if you get in classes with white folks, you're not going to be able to compete with them because you came out in an inferior school background. Now, if I heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. But when I graduated for HBCU and came to Louisville, did my graduate work here with 2 additional degrees, it always struck me, well, they told me a lie.
Yeah, they lied
I
to
said,
you.
wait a minute. They told me I would not be able to compete. Now, grant you, my skills were not that high because it was not emphasized in the community,
Right.
in our family circles. My grandmother was the one that wanted everybody to go to college.
Right.
Mother did end up going. She graduated from municipal, but circumstances pushed all of us in a direction. But as far as I was concerned, I'm looking at, okay, I'm scared to go to these classes because, man, they're going to wipe me out. And here I am in the classes and I'm wiping them out. I said, that can't be.
Yes, they can. Listen, my high school counselor told me that she said I didn't score high on my SAT test, and I knew why I didn't, because I thought it was a 2-hour test, and I worked my butt off.
Yeah.
And then they said we're gonna take a break and come back and do 2 more hours. And so I said, I'm a teenager. I don't want to sit and do another 2 hours of testing. So I just wrote down anything. So she says, Janice, you didn't do good on your scores on your SAT. So you should find you a vocation.
Yep.
And I had won a scholarship to go to my HBCU to Kentucky State. And I said, her name was Montgomery. I don't know if she's still living or not, but anyway. I said, well, Miss Montgomery, I said, I hate to tell you, but I'm going to college anyway. I said, because I already have a scholarship to go to college. Yeah. So just because you tell me that, I didn't score high on the test, I'm telling you, I know why I didn't.
Well, you said, and we're not all we're similarly affected in the same way.
Yeah.
told that
You couldn't
that I
compete.
couldn't go to college. Now, I went to college on a football scholarship, so I had my scholarship.
Okay,
But
there you go.
as my being academically ready to go to college, I really was not, because that was not because at Central High School, I was told you're among the ones that will, you need to go into a vocational trade.
Right,
Now,
right.
there's nothing matter with the vocational trade, but it was like, you know,
But
we
this is what they would just
we're
imagine if they're
not,
telling our kids that today.
yeah.
Are they telling our kids that today?
Well, I think the problem we have right now today is that the kids are being told through media and
Okay.
TV and marketing and things like that. Vocationals today pay a lot more money than they did back in those days.
Look, when
But
we used to have a
no,
vocational school.
well, yeah, but nobody told back in those days, if you were in a vocation, um, you could only practice in that vocation in a black community. My dad was a barber, but he ended up cutting white hair, but he had to take his tools and things over to the hotel to cut white hair because the white guys didn't like the white barbers who were there, you know. Uh,
Right.
but he set up the business in the black community. And the reason why and I say the worst thing that happened to people in Louisville was when we lost Warner Street. Uh,
Right.
because
Urban removal.
yeah, well, the whole idea of black entrepreneurship was on Warner Street, and
Yes, sir.
it was visible.
Yes, absolutely. And vibrant and thriving.
Yep. Yeah, and the problem is that if you say, well, how big could it become? Probably not very big, because we were cut off, because you couldn't sell or to whites, and you couldn't expand your market. But you take Madam C.J. Walker and the other black entrepreneurs, they did it within our own communities.
Community, right.
Now, could that have been duplicated? Yes, because the whole thing of Black Wall Street in was it
Tulsa.
Kansas,
No, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma,
Tulsa.
huh?
Tulsa.
Tulsa, yes. They had begun the process,
Yes.
and in doing it, it scared whites. Well, they could take over. Well, the same thing is happening now. You got a lot of whites who are standing back saying, well, these black and brown people are going to take over. Well, you haven't been doing anything, so why not?
Well, they haven't done anything to our benefit.
Yeah.
So we have to look after our own survival.
Yep.
It's dependent upon us
Yes.
to take care of us. This, like I'm doing this show, it's for us, about us,
Right.
and by us.
Right.
So
So
it's very important that we are invested, and we have to be invested in ourselves.
we have to, and without that self pride, that self belief, we go down in flames. We then gravitate toward grabbing a gun, or robbing somebody, or taking the easiest way out.
They think it's an easy way out.
Yeah, yeah. It's culturally, this country is culturally mixed up, and the whole idea of a constitutional government never worked for whites, because they really didn't like it, because they were always afraid that these black people, brown people, yellow people were somehow going to knock them out, and that meant you knocked them out of money.
Well, we were going to become the majority, like we have become.
Yeah.
That's where all the fear comes from, because we are in the majority now.
Yeah.
So, Nate, listen. You get
It's
together. We're gonna have our sit down. I can't wait to have the sit down meeting, so we can pull these. But it's something that that I'm also related to you through my great grandfather, through Jerry Mack.
yes.
That's something.
Yeah, it's because I did not know that, and I was talking with Edna. She was telling me, she said, no, Janice is related through Jerry Mack. and
Wow.
because my father's middle name is Jerry, and
Okay.
people think we are junior. I'm junior. I said no, but my name is Ennis on my mother's side, the middle
Mhm.
name, and his name is Jerry on my on his side, the father's side, and but Jerry Mack was key because he was my grandmother's brother, and apparently people looked up to Jerry Mack. Jerry
Oh, Jerry
Mack,
Mack was tough cookie, honey.
Jerry Mack was quite a person.
Oh, I mean, even I have a family picture, Nate, that I have to show you. I am the youngest in this picture, and I am sitting in my great grandmother, Jerry Mack's wife. I am sitting in her lap, and to know that she touched me, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It gives me goosebumps to
yeah,
know that I knew enough about Jerry Mack that I had conversations with my great grandfather and even my grandmother, because I didn't know any of my mother's parents. And all this is on my father's side,
right.
so it's got all my father and all his siblings,
Yeah.
my great grandmother and her three children, and all of their children sitting on the floor. It's a picture, it's
I
unbelievable.
well, I'm gonna try to get everybody together and start a process by where we all relate our family ties, but spend each meeting having because it is difficult, but we need to start talking about it and keep
Right,
talking about it until it becomes ingrained in us. These are the people who got us here.
right.
We need to be able to do that, and the only way to do it is we're going to have to set ourselves up to kind of educate ourselves about ourselves.
Okay. Well, I'll open up my home to that because I'm all in.
Oh,
I'm all in because see, the Goldens we try to figure out how I was related to the Goldens and the Greens, and now the Williams, uh, which was John and Jerry, um, and my nephew is close to. He says he's his cousin, one of the Williams
hmm,
brothers' sons. I said he's not just you're not related to him because his uncle married your grandmother. I said, you're related to him through blood. So to give my nephew, who is in his 50s, to give him this family history, so he's looking at this guy who's really his cousin. He might be his fifth or sixth cousin, but who's really related through blood and not through marriage. Okay.
yeah,
So so he can have something else to understand, because he has children and they have children. They have to understand so they can tell the children.
that's exactly right.
You got
That
to be able to tell the kids what's going on, where you come from.
yeah.
And so you just listening to the story being told over and over from when I first got
Will help us to all grapple with what we didn't know, but we need to know because the younger people coming up will need to take on that pride and
right.
fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nate, hook it up. Let's get together soon.
We're gonna do it, Janice. You and I like this whole idea of the podcast, and it may be that certain fact.
I can bring some more family. It's my podcast. If I can do it if I want to talk about my family. But it's the Eliza Tevis Society. We don't know how many branches
Yep.
it touches. We talk about Newburg.
Hmm.
My brother used to go to Newburg. He knew my relatives in Newburg. I never did because he was older than I was. But then my great grandmother, she had all of her children in Smoketown.
Okay.
Okay, so that's where Jerry Mack comes in because Jerry Mack was from Smoketown. Okay,
Where
look, Nate.
I was talking with Edna. She was telling me, she showed me a picture of Jerry Mack. She said, "What do you think?" I said, "He's a dapper guy."
He's Dapper Dan now, let me tell you. Yes, he was.
That's the story about Jerry Mack. He was
Yes, sir.
he was always
Pretty
very, very.
clean. Yeah. Yeah. So, Nate, I'm going to talk to you soon. I mean, you and I just might have to get together. We have to start somewhere. And we can trace every little crick and corner until we get an understanding. Because the more I read about the pamphlet, the booklet that I have, I was able to go back and put it all in order, even down through the Goldens, because the Goldens became related through my grandmother's half sisters, which were Rosses,
Right.
because
That's
three
right.
of those Rosses
Yeah.
married Goldens.
That's the reason why I said you're hooked in here all kinds of ways.
Ooh, I know I got twists and turns happening, but it's exciting. Thank you so much for sharing this with the audience, so they can know just how exciting it is just to find out more about your family and your lineage.
Well,
And just to listen to you, it's like,
my-
you're our own Henry Louis Gates.
Yes.
You didn't hear what I said, did you?
You said something about Henry Louis Gates. I know.
Yeah, I said you are our own Henry Louis Gates.
I'm not sure. Hold the match.
Take care of yourself. It's dinner time. Go have your dinner. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You just make my heart I'm just full of pride and full of joy. Thank you, sweetheart.
Well, I'm full of pride to know that you're on board and are really anxious to learn about it, because a lot of times people don't want to hear, and
yeah. Well, I really got excited when you described Eliza to me and said she was a little woman of small stature, but she was a go-getter and she'd make things happen. I said, woo, that sounds like me. So it just kind of inspired me to know that's my bloodline.
Yeah. Well, that's our bloodline.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is.
I think it's worthy of lifting up. So we need to do that heavy lifting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, darling. Have a good evening. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, sweetie. Bye-bye. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. But this kind of happened maybe 4 years ago. And it happened at a funeral. The last, excuse me. Excuse me. Thank you. It happened at a funeral. A lot of things happen at funerals and wakes. But the last living Carter male, and he was the last Carter, my Uncle Norman, at his wake, Bishop Dennis Lyons told my family a story about how we were all related. And so I approached him. I said, I want to know more about the family connection. And he introduced me to his sister. And since then, we've been putting the pieces to this puzzle together. And Mr. Jerry Williams, the other day, his niece, Sheila, and I were friends in high school. And we used to say we were cousins, but we didn't know how. But now I know how. And it's a wonderful feeling to know, to be able to go that far back into the 1800s and find your relatives and see what they were doing, because they were doing some stuff, because they were trying to survive. If we think we're trying to survive now, they were really trying to survive. So we have to have a lot of pride in our heritage and our lineage, our family line, our bloodline. And the more we know, the better we'll feel about ourselves. Check out Ancestry. They've got a Black Ancestry now. You might get more information. The one thing that I noticed about Black Ancestry, I haven't seen any pictures of my relatives. And you always see white people when they find their ancestors. They got pictures. They got pictures of them in the army. They got pictures of them, in their business. And we don't seem to have a lot of pictures. Well, we're lucky that we had a whole lot of different things, but just think about what they had to do to pass down this verbal history about our families and what they went through so we would know. So we would know what we have to do and continue to do, which is fight for our rights and fight for our freedoms and fight for our children and our children's children. On that note, go have dinner. Bon appetit. Guess who's coming to dinner? I will see you. I'm going to play this again on Friday. Okay? So just so you know, we're going to talk about the Eliza Tevis Society. Once again, this coming Friday. Following Monday, I have a new guest. Have a good evening. Take care. Good night.